Are you noticing changes in our country you find troubling? Do you feel unsafe and at a loss to remedy these fundamental shifts? Have you found the book Go Free by Jason Kuna? The Go Free method provides excellent meme curatives and specific language skills to overcome the anti-white psychological warfare being waged against us across the West. Go Free, a guide to aligning with the archetype of Western kind, by Jason Kuna, available on Amazon.
Good afternoon, Hans. Good afternoon, New Hampshire Patriot.
Good afternoon, Tree.
Can you hear me, Hans?
Loud and clear.
All right. I'll go ahead with the intro and let's get into it. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Shade Tree, White Wellbeing, and WG Space. We hold this space every day at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on X. We are a no white guilt community that meets to practice the concepts and lexicon developed by Jason Kuna, Mr. No White Guilt. You can find him here on X as at No White Guilt NWG, on YouTube and elsewhere as simply No White Guilt, and on the web at nowhiteguilt.org. We discuss a wide variety of topics of interest to white people and look for ways to apply solutions. I'm the Tree Godfather, your host, and my co-host today will be the Mr. Hans the Skipper. We run pretty casual here, but I do ask that you raise your hand if you'd like to jump in. Please don't talk over others. Otherwise, I just call on speakers in turn for their thoughts. If you'd like to hop into the conversation, just request a mic and we'll get you set up. We only ask that you comport yourself as much as possible to the Go Free lexicon. And please act like a proper lady or gentleman of the West. Whichever is applicable. Let's go. All right. It's going to take me a second to grab stuff here and get it up into Jumbo. But that shouldn't take me too long. Let me see. Since I had already preloaded it. All right. Everything should be popping up shortly. How are you this afternoon, Mr. New Hampshire Patriot?
Very well, Tree. And yourself?
I'm tired, but I'm here.
Yeah, yeah.
Always,
I hear you for sure. Yeah, no, I've had a pretty chaotic week, and yesterday was while I was in the space. My son came by, which was you can never see your children enough, and I almost regret pushing him out, and my other children, because I feel like I'm pushing them into a system instead of staying wholesome and together and either building a bigger home or something, but just staying together. And I actually raised the question to my wife, which she thought I would never say in a million years, but I actually, dropped the question to her yesterday after my son left because I missed him immediately. For some reason, I feel like white people have a better connection with family and togetherness and their children. And I said to her, I says, why can't we have them come back home? And she almost dropped everything that was in her hands. And I tried explaining it to her. And, so we'll see what happens. I hope he does. It's not that he's struggling. He's very successful. As far as life is concerned, he's got life figured out. I kind of, led a good example. Not a perfect one. We can all be perfect. But, keeping that family together is something we've been forced, to have them move out and start a new life and all this. We've been forced to that. And I think we should get back to, being together and wholesome as a family. And I'll lead with that and open up the mic.
It's interesting you say that because we've discussed, that many times on this space. And I know CKO and I have discussed it extensively. I don't think, from our biospiritual expression, I don't think it's a normal thing for us to kick our children out. I know historically, for example, girls, they lived at home until they were married. They stayed at home. They were under their father's care and protection. And of course, they submitted to their father, and then they eventually got married, and then they submitted to their husband and were subject to his care and protection. And kind of not too dissimilar for boys. Boys stayed at home until they got married, or but this concept of kicking children out when they're young, and then of course our elderly, we basically dump them off in nursing homes rather than have them at home to be cared for by family. These aren't us. I don't think that they reflect Western civilization norms at all, and I don't think we've been the better for them by any means. Not from anything I've seen. So it's interesting you bring that up because I fully support that idea. I mean, it's not my decision, of course, it's yours, but I think that that's a great idea. If I had a son, I'd be more than happy to have him live with me. Mr. Hans, how are you today?
I'm so great. I cannot tell you, since my account was nuked, I'm posting a lot less on X, and it's incredible how much stuff I got done today. And this is very powerful technology that we're working on now. My employers decided to go all in on AI, so that suits me very well. So hopefully in a month or two, I can start to contribute, because people in our space are already using it, and the scope for this technology is, I would say, unknown at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some good chances there for us. I know I played with it a little bit. I know Biospirit did a beautiful little video with it. I've been kind of tinkering it like in my free time, but I don't generally have a whole lot of that. So it's a little harder for me to pick up. I'm also older and much more set in my ways, and I don't think I have a lot of the lateral thinking that sometimes the AI input requires to get the results I want. I do tend to be more set in my ways. But I am learning. Old dogs can still learn new tricks, and I'll be learning new tricks until the day I die. Mr. Biospirit, my friend, how are you?
Oh, hello. I just got back from shopping and I'm putting stuff away and doing some food things and making some homemade ice cream. And I know it sounds like I make ice cream and sorbet all the time, and I do. It's my one treat. I actually am also actively losing weight, and I am doing a new diet this time. I'm doing a modified keto diet because the last time I did a keto diet, I I didn't have any sugar for like 2 years, and it drove me nuts. And then when I went off the diet, I overate and put all the weight back on. So this time I'm doing a keto diet, but I am allowing myself a homemade dessert every day. And it's working quite well. I've already lost 10 pounds in a month and feeling much better. And so that's how I'm doing. Thank you.
Hey, congratulations on the weight loss. And as far as the ice cream, man, I got to tell you, I, I've never seen anybody mad with an ice cream. You ever notice that? I, ice cream's got a way of putting a smile on your face that not much else does. Good afternoon, Julia. You should have a mic on your way, and then we'll get you set up as a co-host once that clears through. Good afternoon, AAA. You can hold the chair. Jerome is here. Benjamin's here. Grace Smith is here. Papa Antivitism is here. Cool Papa J and Joel. Got a nice bunch here. Let's see, Julia. That should get on its way. So, as is customary, we try to start with a Westman of the day. And for those of you who haven't gone ahead and read the anti-white wiki links, I have a clue for you. Maybe you can hear that. This is Mr. George Grant Blaisdell. This is my Westman of the day. So he was born in 1895. He lived till 1978. And you might not have heard his name, but you've heard his invention. He was the American inventor known for the Zippo, which was based on an Austrian lighter in 1933. In the 1940s, George bought buildings that would eventually become the Zippo factory. So he had quite of an interesting growing up period. So he quit school in grade 5, and his father sent him to military academy. He went to military academy until his sudden dismissal 3 years later. Thus, he only attended school until grade 8. Thereafter, he worked for his family's company, the Blaisdell Machinery Company. And I wasn't able to find out what exactly it was that they made, but clearly, I'm guessing something in metal stamping, and that kind of would make sense to me. So he founded Zippo in 1932, produced the first Zippo lighter in early of 1933. And it got its name because he liked the sound of the word zipper. And Zippo sounded pretty modern to him. So in 1936, he was finally granted a patent for the Zippo. They became pretty popular in the military, as I can attest. That's kind of where I first got to really play with them. But I smoke a pipe now, so now I have a whole collection of Zippos. But especially during World War II, they ceased production of lighters for consumer markets and dedicated all manufacturing to the U.S. military, even though they didn't technically have a military contract. But many soldiers asked for them at the PX and the BX for them to be available. So that's how they kind of got that kind of happened. Most of the World War II Zippos were actually made of steel, but Zippo aficionados would know that Zippos are traditionally made of brass. But of course, the brass shortage during the war caused them to be made of a different material. So skipping ahead a little bit, after World War II, the Zippo lighter became increasingly used in advertising by companies large and small through the 1960s. That's something I remember very much of. And they made their 600 millionth Zippo in 2020. So that's just a little bit of start into Mr. George Blaisdell. New Hampshire Patriot, go ahead.
What an interesting topic, and talk about a strange occurring of events. So Zippos have always been a very strong influence in my life. Not in the sense of what some may think. My father, who is a former Army Ranger, he always had a Zippo, so it was just, excuse me, it was just always around. I always heard that click. I'd be watching him fill it with the Ronson oil. When I later, and he used to smoke cigarettes. Later on, I started smoking cigarettes. I've since haven't smoked in 10 years. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life. When I started smoking, the lighter I purchased was a Zippo. Not too long ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago, my father's 20 years older than me. So, but I won't age myself, but he's 20. My parents were 19 and 20. My father was 20, mother 19. He's getting to the age of passing the gate. He's healthy, but he gives me a call. He lives out in California. I moved from California years ago. For those of you that don't know, like 25 years ago. And he's telling me that he has a bunch of collectibles that some of the other family members just don't have any interest in, because nowadays everything's technological, everything has to do with computers and whatever, and these other people around him, they have no idea what a Zippo is. And there's some other collectibles, but that's not the point. So I remember he used to have a shelf in the kitchen, and he made it himself, like a knickknack shelf that had collections starting from year, they used to have the stamp, the Roman numerals on the bottom. Tree Godfather, you can probably look at the bottom of that, of your lighter, your Zippo, and if it's like XII, it's a certain year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he used to have this shelving that had individual boxes. I think they're probably about 3 inches wide, 3 inches high, and he would just have them all in there. And he got a custom one made for him by his wife. We happen to have the same names. I'm not a junior. I'm the second. My father strictly told me, if anybody calls me a junior, punch them in the mouth. So that's the kind of childhood I had. So he's going to be sending me those my way, and it's just awesome that we're actually talking about this. Those lighters are amazing. I have several of them. You don't see them on the shelf anymore. He has the older brass ones. I have the steel ones, obviously. But yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing story, brother. Yeah, for the record, of course, I know the Roman numerals were a certain period. It was slashes for a certain period. This was stamped C09, so that would be March of 2009. That's how long I've been using this particular one. And the other one I have up here, it says A23, so that's 2023 in January. I love the newer systems, a little bit easier to date code. But Mr. Biospirit.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it until you were talking about the Zippo, but my oldest brother, who was in the Korean War, always had a Zippo, and that's probably where he got it, was when he was in the military. And like New Hampshire Patriot, I used to smoke also, and quit when I was 38, so that was like 25 years ago. And I will also attest it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And I don't recommend going through it for anyone. It's very, very difficult. And I've never had a Zippo myself. I didn't like the smell of the lighter fluid. So it always seemed to me like the Zippo lighters were um, just this incredible odor that came out of them that I didn't care for. Um, so anyway, that's all I have to say on that.
It's funny you say that. You know, a lot of people actually like the smell of the fluid. Me being one of them. I don't know. There's just, I guess it reminds me of two-stroke in the morning, uh, riding dirt bikes. That two-stroke exhaust smell. I don't know. To me, it smells pleasant. But then I never said I was cultured either. Mr. New Hampshire Patriot.
Yes, I was going to second. Yes, I am one of those that truly love the smell of Ronson oil. I don't know if I could attribute it to any particular thing, but I just know that every time I smelled it, I was with my father, and I truly loved my father. We don't have such a great relationship, but I wanted it then. But that's what it reminded me of, and that's what it does even to this day.
Yeah, so that's kind of the interesting thing because, you know, I smoked cigarettes when I was younger. I actually quit, oh, I don't know, 20 years ago. And I would smoke a pipe occasionally. And it really got to be very nostalgic for me after my father died, um, because he never smoked cigarettes, but he smoked a pipe. He always smoked an aromatic. He smoked um, Captain Black, if I recall, Captain Black White, and he would like use a Zippo. So the smell of the fluid, the smell of the tobacco, it's very nostalgic for me, and just kind of for me. I guess mentally, it's my way of having my father with me, whom I miss, and you know, you always miss your parents. I don't think that ever goes away. Miss Julia, good afternoon to you. How are you, dear?
I am good. I don't really have much to say on Zippos, although I guess that some of that advertising stuff did get to me. So I come from a family of, like, I hate smoking with a passion. Cigarettes, that is. Um, I just can't stand the smell. I have a very, very strong sense of smell, and it used to be torture visiting Europe before and even New York City when I was like before I was 21, but when I had a fake ID and I was like going to clubs and things, it was just so bad. The clubs were packed and everyone was smoking, and it's really hard to dance when your lungs are filled with smoke. I used to like go around and grab people's cigarettes after they made it illegal and stomp them out because people would still like just violate the law. Um, I'll never forget, like, when I was living in Switzerland, which was when I was 12, um, and the cigarette smoking was terrible everywhere. It's like such and France, of course, really, really bad. And I went on an ice skating rink, and everyone was smoking at the ice skating rink, and just like smoke. As someone actually, got me on the hand with their cigarette. So it's like it's freaking dangerous. Um, and then the planes. I don't know if anyone who used to fly back in the day when they had the smoking section, as if that doesn't permeate through the entire plane, and then the same on the trains. So this is just turning into a rant on smoking. How much I hate cigarette smoking. I really hate it though. However, I do think Zimmos are cool. So something of that advertising did get to me. I like how they're all metal. I have a severe hatred of plastic, so I think it's really cool that they're yeah, they have always seemed like high class and snazzy to me. That part did get through somehow. So that's my rant.
Yeah, and they're durable too. This is not the one I just read that's from 2009. This isn't even the oldest one I have and use regularly. I have one from the 1950s that still works just fine because the wear components are replaceable. The flint, the wick, even the packing is all replaceable. But interesting thing about cigarettes, I can't really stand the smell of cigarettes myself. And what's interesting, I find a lot of people who can't stand cigarette smoke, like it totally turns them off, don't really mind the smell of pipe tobacco. Because it smells so much different and so much less offensive. I have people that will come up and smell like they'll sniff and say, "Hey, that smells pretty good," when I'm smoking a pipe. People who absolutely wouldn't stand and tolerate the smell of a cigarette. Mr. Hans, good to see you back. I'm not quite sure when you dropped out, so I don't know how much you missed. But I was going over the inventor of the Zippo.
I dropped out to make a video of my lighter. I never smoked. I never smoked, but I use a lighter every day because we light a fire for lunch. We barbecue meat every day, and I love my lighter.
Julia?
I feel like men and fire are such have a love affair with each other. Um, that I can never hope to. I mean, I like fire too, but not like my brother does. Not like the men I've known. It's just um, it's a very male solar energy and very daring and dramatic and masculine. So yeah, of course, something like a Zippo would be invented by a man. Of course, most things are invented by men, but especially something like a lighter. Um, It's just so classically masculine. Uh, and it goes to show someone like Hans, who doesn't even smoke, still enjoys uh, fire and a lighter and having that power over flame, um, like Prometheus giving fire to humans. Uh, I also, by the way, do agree. Pipe smoke is much less offensive. Um, it, yeah, there's something about like I really what I particularly hate about cigarette smoke is it like gets stuck in my hair and I have really long hair and also clothes. And if you things like really nice wool or cashmere, you don't want to wash that a lot. So it's just really unfortunate to have that stuff get permeated with stale cigarette smoke forever. But pipe smoke does smell very different and yeah, much less offensive.
It's definitely something about men, fire, and raw meat that's definitely very masculine. It takes us back to our early days, I guess, primordial soup days where we're out there, taking down a saber-toothed tiger and dragging a quarter back to the cave to roast over an open fire. Mr. New Hampshire Patriot.
Amen. Nothing better than those two things right there, Tree. So the other thing with the Zippos is that it's multi-purpose. So even when it runs out of fluid, there are so many uses with the parts that if you're in that kind of a situation. Regarding the smoking thing, it's funny we slid to this smoking part. Well, not really. We're talking about lighters. But since I've quit smoking, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I too, Julia, cannot stand the smell of smoke. If somebody is in a vehicle in front of me, and I even, and I got my windows down, and the smoke comes in, I instantly like want to vomit. And that's funny because I smoked for nearly 30 years. But I'll land there.
I had a point that I was going to make, and it just slipped right through my brain cells. So I'll go to Julia instead.
I want to congratulate everyone who has had a nicotine addiction and quit, because it is the most addictive drug known to man. So it is, and once you add that the oral fixation aspect, which is addictive in its own right, this is similar with any type of like routine. So this is why like things like caffeine are addictive as well. So like for example, IV users will inject water, like really hardcore ones will even inject water if they don't have drugs, because the whole routine itself becomes addictive. And something about oral fixation is um, a very addictive, probably because of I think because of breastfeeding. It like harkens back to those primal memories, and nicotine then itself is just an incredibly addictive drug because it's so short acting, and just the way that it works in the brain, it really lights up those dopamine receptors in that part of the brain. So it's very very difficult to quit, especially if you started it young, which a lot of people do. So uh, I don't know. I seem to be like immune to addiction, but then again, I um, also just don't really like any drugs that are addictive. So lucky me, I guess. But anyway, congratulations to everyone who has quit.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need to take care of our health, and anything that can help prolong our lives is certainly a big plus. And I just remembered that point I was going to make. I carried a lighter for a long time before I ever picked up a cigarette. So I'm talking 7, maybe 6 years old, very, very young, because that was what you did. You carried a pocket knife, you carried a lighter. And of course, nowadays I have other accoutrements that go with my everyday carry, as New Hampshire Patriot could probably attest to. But the ability to make fire, um, it's just something back when I was growing up, that was a boy had a lighter, he had his pocket knife, he had something to write with, and among various snips and other snails. Mr. Hunzelot.
I wanted to say that I barbecued really thick mutton chops, but then I decided that would be, I don't want to make everyone envious, so I'm not going to mention it. But the other thing I want to say, um, my mother and father, they tried one time. My mother went on this big push to stop smoking. She and my father smoked. That's probably why I never smoked. So it was very funny because you can't hide things from your children. So I would burst into the room, and then she would be in front of the mirror, and her hands would go like she was swatting flies. And soon I figured out she she's cheating. So then it became a mission to find where is she hiding the cigarettes. And I found all her hiding places, and then I would go in secret to my father and tell him, Mother is cheating, and this is her cigarettes. And but back at the ranch, what I didn't know was my father was smoking all the cigarettes. Yeah, so that was a failure. But really, they did struggle a long time to get rid of that habit, and this is one of the reasons why I never even tried it, because I have my father has a very strong character, and the fact that he struggled um, to drop that habit made me realize that I don't need that baggage. And I have much the same personality type as him, so I'm probably going to be quite um, affected or quite vulnerable to addiction. So I just never tried it.
Yeah, nicotine is definitely addictive stuff, man. I remember when I quit cigarettes, it was rough as hell. And that may sound weird because I do still smoke a pipe, but 1 or 2 bowls of pipe tobacco in a day is a whole lot different because one thing, you don't inhale the smoke anyway. But yeah, it was definitely a rough ride, man. I remember it took me about 3 months, I think, before I was okay. It's probably the worst 3 months of my wife's life. Mr. Biospirit.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention because Julia was so complimentary about people who had quit, that I wanted to say that it took me at least 12 times to quit, and when I did, I had um, just recently read a book, and it was all about um, breath and breathing, and I incorporated. Um, every time I wanted to have a cigarette, instead I would do very conscious deep breathing. And I found that it was just as satisfying as having a cigarette. And I've done some research on that, and it there are some indications that what people are craving when they're having a cigarette is actually air. They want the effects of that you get from doing some deep breathing, which is that your mind clears and you get kind of crisp clarity, which is what the nicotine does. And so that was how I did it, and I was amazed at when I did that, um, it worked. And I've told other people about it, and they all look at me like I'm nuts. But anyway, that was how I did it. I it was cold turkey, and it was miserable, but it was very doable.
Yeah, I got to second that. Don't, for anybody does smoke and you're trying to quit, don't be surprised if you're not successful the first time around. I don't know anybody who was, to be quite honest. I've never met anybody who was able to quit and tried it once and was able to quit once. I know. I actually remember one of the times that I had quit for 6 or 7 weeks, and then I had it was a trip to Frankfurt, and of course, as Julia might know, this was when you couldn't smoke on the planes or in most airports, but in Frankfurt, Maine, they had these smoking kiosks, and I remember there was a lot of stuff going wrong, so I was not primed for success. And I'm standing there, like I'm going through, go through the airport. There's a guy standing there, and I just said, "Frig it." Hey, can I have a cigarette? You know, I remember that very vividly. That was one of the times that I had quit for, like I said, maybe 6, 7 weeks, and it just so don't feel embarrassed if you try to quit and you fail. Just keep going at it. You'll get it eventually, Mister New Hampshire Patriot.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the mic again. Yeah, I agree with. I'm going to start off with the agreeing with. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with most of our points anyway. But when you were talking about having a Zippo before you smoked, I too did the same thing. Again, I just thought it was just something that I had to do. I think it was just. I think it's our connection with Earth, nature, survival, all of our ancestors just bleed right through generations to us, and we know we just need to have these things. On the topic of EDC, I know I can agree. I'm probably 100% agreement with, and I probably carry every single thing you do as well. Even still, as a non-smoker, I have lighters in my vehicles. I have carry one in my pocket. I don't even need it. But and as well as the quitting the smoking, no, you are not going to do it the first time. If you do, you're a miracle. I agree. It took me 12 times, maybe, several years, several attempts. Smoking a pipe, yes, is very different. It's just for a different contrast. It's like smoking a cigar. You do not inhale the cigar. If you smoke a cigar and inhale, you will be lightheaded, vomit, pass out, etc., etc. And I really like the conversation, and I'm glad I came here today. Thank you.
Ms. Julia.
Well, I have to. I hope I don't make anyone feel bad, but my dad supposedly quit cold turkey. I don't know how. I think he only smoked for a few years. I don't know how heavily he smoked, but he did. I think he also smoked marijuana at some point as well. And he just quit cold turkey. Um, but yeah, he's my dad's kind of superhuman to me, so it's not surprising. Like, he's always been very like been doing an hour and a half of yoga and meditation every day, like his since he was like in his like early 30s. And he even spent some time with the Dalai Lama, and like, I think a whole year, in fact. So he's like really into uh well, let's say spirituality and things like that. And I think that really helped. So I'm not surprised to hear a biospirit story about the deep breathing, and that makes sense, given as he explained how nicotine works. Um, it also does like open up blood vessels and things like that. So yeah, it would have a similar effect. But I've never been like able to get into the deep breathing stuff. I need to try it again. I tried like meditating when I was much younger, and my mind was just like flying all over the place. But you're supposed to kind of like sit through that. So this is something I need to try again. Um, but I wanted to mention something. What was it? I can't remember. It'll come back.
New Hampshire Patriot.
So something I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. It's funny that the conversation started with the white man of the West. The feature story with the Zippos, and but the commonality of everything is it all brings remembrance of our white fathers, right? Our the men in our family, right? The guys that brought us up, right? And it needs to be a reminder to every one of us, and I'm sure we know. For those that don't, we are the important factor in our children's upbringing. It produces another generation of good, white, well-being, white, well-raised individuals and men and women, because my stepdaughter is doing very well. My stepson is doing. It's just the whole core of everything, and I'm not trying to do a pat on the back. It's just this should be just a common thing. And I think that is the distinct difference. And everybody can debate this and that about different ethnicities and nationalities and races. You will never convince me ever that another nationality, ethnicity, or race has another way of being a good total person, morality, integrity, courage, intelligence, than a white person. I'll land.
The cool thing of Go Free is we don't have to worry about what other people do, and we just express our own biospirit. We understand that we have a right to be surrounded by that which we prefer, which is our own biospiritual reflection onto the earth, and we're not immoral for wanting that. I totally agree with, I know we've talked many times in this space about having good parents, plural. That is very important. Shifting back a little bit, because we kind of brought up the EDC thing, I would say the third thing that's always in my pocket, and this applies even when I'm sleeping, um, among some other things that YouTube doesn't like me talking about. But I've always got a mag light, like a little single cell flashlight. I'm curious what other EDC items you guys carry. But we'll go back to Ms. Julia.
I remember what I wanted to say, which was one thing that I always found nice about smoking culture was how it was an opportunity to socialize and uh, like like the whole like bum a cigarette thing um, has always been kind of cool to me. Um, just being able to offer us a stranger who was until recently someone of your same race, so not so much a stranger really, and that's just like give and take. I thought was really nice, and there hasn't been anything to really replace that. Like there's vapes now, but unfortunately, vaping is might be even worse than smoking cigarettes, especially if you like hand roll your own tobacco that hasn't been doused in chemicals. Those are probably better to smoke than vaping because of there's various problems, but like the fluid for vaping is really toxic, and then there's like heavy metals as well that are um, as part of the vaping process, like vaporized essentially into your lungs. So it, and then that's not even getting into the synthetic flavorings and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, it would be really nice if I just those are that's something that I when I was younger and I saw people smoking, kind of wished I could indulge in just that kind of camaraderie, and it just makes me realize how many things we have lost um, as part of white erasure. I was reading a thread last night that talked about how everything closes so early now, and there's just like no places to go to like just hang out, and that's so true. And apparently, things now in New York City close early, like when the sun goes down. That's like wild to me because I lived there for a few months in 2001, actually during 9/11, and also for just over a year in like 2007 to 2008. And it was, especially when I was younger, I loved how everything was open so late. Like things were 24 hours, many things. And apparently, COVID really did away with that. But even before that, like smartphones were changing that. And man, I feel so bad for younger people today, for like teens and young adults who um, don't have anywhere to go. Like we had bookstores that were open till midnight or beyond, and even in the suburbs, you had grocery stores that were open 24 hours, and apparently that's not the case anymore. I hear now, like in Germany, everything closes so early. It's awful. I hate it. And then Sunday, everything is closed. It's like Christmas on Sunday. Every Sunday is Christmas in Germany, but without the Christmas, just like everything's closed. Doctors like hours are super limited. It's just ah, and I think it's all really is part of white erasure that we don't feel we don't have that high trust society anymore. We don't feel comfortable even living above our people used to live above, especially in urban areas, of their businesses, and people don't feel safe to do that anymore because of white flight and all of that. So yeah, it just made me think it's sad we don't have more little rituals like that are socially cohesive.
I would say the thing with vaping, and I'm not overly familiar with it to be honest, but handing somebody a cigarette out of your pack that they're going to put their lips on is probably a little bit different than you have your device and somebody else putting their lips on it. I don't know. That, I'm not a germaphobe by any means, but that would kind of ick me out, to be honest, Mr. New Hampshire.
Thank you again for the microphone. So it's very important, and I'm glad that we're actually getting onto the topic of EDC, everyday carries. To answer your question, my personal flashlight that I carry on, among the rest of the goods, is a 50,000 lumen telescopic. So it starts off at about maybe 3 inches, but you can telescope it out and it goes to maybe like 4, 4.5. But what it does is it either zooms when it's tight it's got a very tight beam. When you extrude the tip, it produces a wider beam. It also has a strobe feature. It uses a 81650, no, an 18650 battery, which is slightly stronger than a couple of double A's. So they last relatively long. I'll try and find the link and see if I can post it in here. So EDC is probably like one of the most important things we can do in this society. Julia had mentioned, and I'm sure we're all aware, we don't have that high trust society. We wish we could. We wish we could just walk about as if safely and amongst the public with our family. But unfortunately, through different and other reasons and means, this is the society we have, and the best we can do is be prepared and protect our family and ourselves from these things. New Hampshire is a very special state. For those of you that don't know, we have constitutional carry, which I helped pass. I wasn't the sole reason, but it took us 3 years, multiple testimonies before the state house, multiple rallies, multiple letters, emails, etc. But it's passed. So, and we also have open carry, which despite your feelings, I'm for it. What's a show of force, right? You're not going to rob that store if you see that man with a 357 on his hip. You understand? Like they did in the West. You didn't rob the bar. You didn't rob the bank. Why? Because they all had guns. So especially with females, you know, if you can and you have the will and the means, purchase a firearm, please. If it's legal in your state, please, 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 please fire it at as many times as possible. Practice, practice, practice. I was a former top 100 shooter in the state of New Hampshire in 2017. I was sponsored by Glock. This was competition shooting. I mean practice, because even if I missed a day of practice, my shots were off. And when I'm saying my shots were off, we're talking the thickness of a penny. But it gets even worse if you don't practice especially with a pistol. You lose your fundamentals very quickly. Get very familiar with your firearm. Know when to pull it. That's another thing. Don't put yourself in that situation. I hate that you have to live this way. I didn't make it this way. I'm sorry. But just, always surround yourself with more people. Always go in a lit area, et cetera, et cetera. Carry a knife. Always have a knife. If you wear boots, put it in your boot. Have one in your waist. Tuck it. Yeah, it's very important. And unfortunately, this is the society we have right now. We don't have that honor society. So we just need to protect ourselves and our family. And I hope everybody heard what I said. I really mean everything I said. Thank you.
No worries, man. That's good stuff. Yeah, so the light I'm carrying right now, or I have for the last 5 years actually, has been a little Olight i3 TOS. Takes a single AAA. It's been pretty bomb proof. It's been driven over twice. It's been dunked in a drainage pan full of oil. That took me quite a while to realize that's where it went, and it survived that pretty well. If that thing has seen some hell. The finish is almost gone, but it still works, and so I'm going to get my $30 worth out of it. If the important thing about open carry is that even if you don't choose to open carry, I generally do not. But there are places where, if you have it under your jacket and reach up to grab something and it can become unconcealed, it's always good to have the right to open carry, because then you're covered. If you accidentally get it shown, It's good to cover your ass that way. And you kind of mentioned, know when to pull. And I know you're fairly new here, but I'll tell you, one of the people that we talk about in this community somewhat often is my friend Andrew Branca, who runs the Law of Self-Defense channel on YouTube. And he's here on X as at Law of Self-Defense. And I thoroughly, thoroughly recommend everyone who, if you're going to carry, take one of his law self-defense courses, and he teaches you the real down and dirty law in every state, or you can get state-specific courses too. Uh, all the self-defense law that they can use to screw you in court, you can become a law self-defense member, and he's basically a use of force expert, and he will come to bat for you. It's worth the price of the membership. So I definitely recommend that to everybody. It's interesting. He has what he calls the 3S rule. Don't hang out with stupid people. Don't go to stupid places, and don't do stupid things. And he said that a few years ago, and it's kind of stuck with me. Mr. Biosphere of the West.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated that you guys are always talking about all of these things that you carry around with you. And I imagine that you must like have to have a duffel bag or something that you're carrying around all the time because there's so many items. I am the exact opposite. I leave the house. I have a credit card in one pocket. I have my ID in the other pocket, and I have my car key or my truck key, and that's it. That's all I leave the house with. And as far as protection, I've got my dogs. One of my dogs is very scary to people because he just looks like he's a scary dog. He's a pushover, but he's a scary looking guy. And then also I lost my right to self-defense and will not be able to get it back unless Trump gives me a presidential pardon. So that's out for me. And plus here in California, it's just like a no starter anyway. So that's me. I carry practically nothing when I go out. But the other thing is that I don't really go anywhere. As the joke from that old TV show Lost is, I rarely leave the island, so nothing really happens here where I live. So that's me.
Yeah, I don't generally tend to go stray too far. I don't. I have spent such a career of traveling all over hell and creation. So many places in the U.S., so many places on the planet, and I'm to the point now where I don't even want to go down the street for a loaf of bread. And my wife, of course, is the total opposite. She's more of a homebody, but doesn't never really get to go anywhere. So, for her, going places is exciting. For me, it's just like, oh, come on, do I have to? And I mean that quite literally, like to go 800 yards to the little corner store for a gallon of milk. I would just as soon go without. It's that bad. But uh, nonetheless, I don't really feel, I'm so used to it. I've done it all my life. I've always carried, a pocket knife, a flashlight, and a lighter. Those are three things I've always had on me, from the age of being a small boy. Just ever since I was in Cub Scouts, and ever since then, it's just been part of my personality. And of course, as I got old enough to carry other things, I started carrying other things. Like right now, I carry a Glock 29, and that's what I've been carrying for the past 15 years. I have a Gen 1 Glock 29, and I throw that in a little inside the waistband holster, and then a 15 rounder in my back pocket, and I'm good to go for pretty much anything that comes along. Mr. New Hampshire Patriot.
Yeah, those are very good items. A Gen 1, huh? How do you like the trigger on those?
It suits me fine. It's had a little bit of work. So it's a little bit lighter than OEM. I think it's set to 2.5 pounds, but it's got a nice clean break off. And I got the tritium night sights on it. Those have been on there for 15 years. Uh, and the only other thing that's not factory on it is the little extension for the mag. So you have a little bit of ledge there.
Wow, very nice. So I can, if I may, I just want to slightly describe what my competition pistol was. It was a Glock 34, 9mm ported slide, lone wolf barrel. Because if you guys aren't familiar with Glock, I also reload. That was also a contributor to me quitting smoking. My final time, I ended up purchasing getting into shooting competitions and steel challenges and et cetera, et cetera. And I ended up buying a Dillon 550B, progressive press, the whole kit and caboodle. It was kind of expensive, but I was making 1,000 rounds an hour, so it paid for itself. So every single time I wanted to have a cigarette or felt the urge, I would go out to I had a 3-season porch, and I would just go start banging out 1,000 rounds, put it on some local talk radio or whatever, and just totally space out. But as far as the Glock, I had a Vogel 3.5 pound drop in trigger. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Robert Vogel. Very good competition shooter, as well as other modifications. But as far as I knew it, on your EDC, if you get apprehended in some sort of situation, let's just say, they would consider any modifications to either the firearm or the ammo. They could pursue further charges. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the ammo called RIP, uh, RIP. What it was is in different calibers is they had it shred off, and the edges were serrated a little bit to where when it made contact, instead of a hollow point, it would just dud. Pretty much, that's what a hollow point does. It kind of duds. A solid point, it can go deeper, penetrate deeper. These ones had serrations on the side, which actually made it cantaloupe or butterfly, like a blooming onion, and it would then create 9 different penetrations. So, and there was actually a case, I can't remember where it was, where they had that ammo, and they actually tried charging the guy for each shard that he sent through this guy when he had this altercation. I'm not sure how the case went, but that's the case.
Yeah, I can tell you, Andrew Branca actually talks about that because, um, if you get charged in a self-defense situation, um, everything is going to be made a big deal of. And now you will see the same prosecutor, and we've seen cases here that that have come up in a course on X, where they'll make a big deal of, he was carrying extra deadly hollow point ammunition, and in the very next case, the same prosecutor will say he was carrying extra deadly solid ammunition, full metal jacket ammunition, and that's just kind of the way prosecutions run. So they're going to question every little thing, and he actually does go into quite a bit of detail of discussing, such things such as that. Like, you probably don't want to have fuck them all printed on your slide, or kill them all, let God sort them out, on your back plate. That's probably not a good idea, um, for just that reason, because any little thing is going to go in front of the jury, and of course they're free to interpret it how they will. Mr. Hans.
I would say that extends even to the name of your dog. Um, because some people think it's funny if they name their dogs World War II characters, and that will definitely not play well in a courtroom. But the other what thing I wanted to say was my brother gifted me a flashlight. It was a wonderful little thing. It just fit into my fist, and it was totally smooth. So it doesn't. But in you could feel the but the most important feature was the tactical back switch. So you could hold it in your fist, and you could still use your for support. And I lost it. And then what happens often is you just think, well, I'll make do without. And it's been a constant irritation. And I just ordered one right now when we were talking about it because I realized this thing has been irritating me for a long, long time. And I could just, for almost no money, just order another one and get it done.
I can relate so bad. My wife will tell you, I can't stand losing things. Even if it's the most trivial thing, I just can't stand losing things. If it's something I've gotten used to using, if it's a particular pen, a favorite screwdriver, it doesn't matter what it is. I, when I get comfortable with something and I don't have it anymore, it will gnaw on me to death until I either find it or replace it. So I can relate to that so much. Um, I this is well that's how I ended up with the flashlight I have now, because I actually had one before that I carried, and I still have no idea where it ever went to. But not having one in my pocket ate me up for about a month and a half until I finally bit the bullet and ordered a new one. Ms. Julia.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and like I've never lost my keys. Like never lost my ID, anything like that. Um, but recently, and I don't believe I've lost. I think it's just got to be amongst my stuff somewhere. Um, I lost my German bank card. Now I primarily use my American bank card, so this is not like a huge deal. Um, but I just don't believe that I've lost it, and I know it's not stolen because like I just don't think they would take just that card and nothing else. Um, and it's such a mystery. Like I mean, yeah. But I went to the last place I used it, which was to make like a transfer at like a kind of sister branch, and they're like, "Well, if you had left your card here or dropped it, or the machine hadn't spit it out or something, we would have just um, destroyed it because it's not our bank, even though it's like the related bank. It's very retarded." Um, because I thought to ask if they had a lost and found, and they're like, "No, no, we don't have a lost and found." It's very, very silly. Apparently, it's just strange to me that they wouldn't do that. But yeah, I'm the same way. It's horrible losing things, and and every day I think of this. I'm like, where could it be? Where could it be? I but we'll find out. I don't think it's lost. I have like a feeling. So we'll see. Maybe in a week I'll be back and I'll be like, I found it. It was amongst some cash or something.
Yeah, funny. The most recent episode of anything like that was my hat. You know what? Well, those of you here in the community know that I had a stroke earlier this month, and I was at a fair when that happened. And one of the things that got lost in the shuffle of getting me in the ambulance, hooked up, and all that, and then my wife having to try to deal with our little one, my oldest one, and all the other rigmarole, my hat got lost. And that ate me up in the hospital something fierce because that hat goes with me everywhere. It'll go in my casket when I die. So she did manage to call. Somebody had turned it into lost and found. And of course, she had to drive like an hour and a half to go get it. But we did recover my hat. So all was not lost, but that 4 or 5 days I was without it bothered me more than having the freaking stroke. Almost, I swear to God, it was bad. I just had this gnawing thing where I didn't have something that belonged to me, and it just irritated me. But with that, I did throw up a couple topics up top. We'll start getting into these. One of the ones I threw up here, and unfortunately, CKO is not with us today. This is probably more up her alley. But this involves a digital ID that's going to be made law for all adults in the UK. And of course, this is the solution to the rampant migrant problem. I find this very interesting because now, don't we already have passports for that? Don't they already have ID for that? And I always feel like these things are really more about control than about doing anything effective. Mr. Hans, your thoughts?
Yes, it's always interesting how the anti-white regime will cause the problem, and then the remedy will be tyranny. So they know how to solve crime. You can solve crime almost instantly by just enforcing standards, and then everyone will understand. If I do a serious crime, I'm not seeing the sunrise tomorrow, and then they will magically be able to control themselves, because that's how the world was 100 years ago. So they know how to solve crime, but they are causing it, and then they're using the crime as a pretext to increase the tyranny. And this is another example of that.
So the confusing thing for me, I guess I'll word it that way. Now, being in America, I know that I think only 10% of Americans have a passport for whatever reason, which is not typical. Most people elsewhere in the world, everybody's got a passport. And I think in Europe, it there it's over it's high 90 it's like in the high 90 percentile that pretty much everybody just has a passport. So why would you need any other ID except for to enforce tyranny? Miss Julia.
Regarding stopping crime, it's particularly uh, easy because most of the crime, at least in modern Western cities, is caused by a tiny percentage of repeat offenders. So if you just get rid of those people, you get rid of like 90% of the crime. So I've seen figures where it's like there's like 50 people in like New York City, and those are they're causing like 90% of the crime. So it's yeah, it's just they don't punish repeat offenders, as we saw with what happened to Arena, of course. They just keep letting them get off.
Hey, go ahead, Biospirit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the thing about digital ID, I don't really even understand what they mean by digital ID, because our IDs now are already like like your state ID, if you get stopped for a traffic thing, they can just scan it. Your the same with your passport, it's scannable and they know everything about you. So what is this new digital ID going to do, other than be able to track you when you have it on you? um, I I just don't understand what the difference is that this is going to do. I know that here in California they started having what they called a real ID, which I didn't get because I didn't see the need for it. But that's supposed to distinguish you as being an actual citizen, because they started giving our IDs to illegals. So it was supposed to differentiate between who was actually a citizen and who wasn't, which I thought was absurd. So I decided I didn't want to participate in that. And then they did this year where you couldn't get on an airplane unless you had your real ID. But again, you don't need it if you just use your passport. So um, honestly, what is a digital ID, and what is it supposed to do? I don't know.
Well, that's a question I think Julie is about to answer, because I personally cannot answer what is the real difference, for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. For the same reason I didn't get a real ID. I've already got a passport. I don't need a real ID. Miss Julia.
I think it's all about getting people to be always to be smartphone dependent and to always have their smartphones on it. So it will require you to have like a certain app, and then this app is then like a backdoor into your smartphone, and it just means, yes, you can be tracked anywhere because everyone's smartphones have GPS, and they also have cameras in them. So if you use anything like Face ID, or where it's just your face, which is the password for the unlock for your phone, then it actually is your phone takes like regular pictures of you, which is really freaky. You can find videos of this in order to, I guess, keep it up to date or something, and to make sure that the person using the phone is the real user. So yeah, I think it ties into this greater surveillance state, um, all this Agenda 30 type stuff where people are constantly everything you do, every transaction, every interaction you have with a person, every conversation is recorded. Um, and in order to get everyone on that train, they need everyone to have a smartphone. And in order to get everyone to have a smartphone, they need everyone to have digital ID, which requires you to have this app, which only smartphones can support. So I think it's really all about that. Um, and there's a lot of other things that smartphones can be used to do, or like maliciously, essentially, like the 5G, um, which we don't know all the effects of, and um, it just makes you like connected to, because so many people, the way that they use their phones, they're like always on them, and it's just getting people more addicted to phones, smartphones in particular.
Oh, that's extra scary. Um, okay, well, I thank you for that extra information. Actually, I know quite a bit about RF, but we'll get into that a little bit shortly. And I'll let New Hampshire Patriot go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on. I just caught the last little bit of what Julia was saying. Remember when we used to be able to disable the phones, right? You used to be able to disconnect the batteries. Well, now try to disconnect your battery. It's a whole process.
Yeah, that's certainly a valid point, because now most, the older cell phones, you could take the back off and pull your battery out. And now you don't have that option, which is um, a source of consternation. Um, in regards to the 5G RF, I, I think that is more of a overstated problem compared to everything else going on. But I'll land that one there. Mr. Biospirit.
Well, that's all very interesting to hear from what Julia was saying, because I didn't even think about it, meaning that you had to carry your phone with you all the time. Because um, I often don't carry my phone with me because it's like, why bother? I don't have stuff on it that I feel like I need to have it with me all the time. And I don't, if I'm just going out somewhere around town, um, if I miss a spam call, it's not going to ruin my day. So I often don't take it with me. So if I was required to have it with me at all times, that would really annoy me. So I thank you for that information, and now I will say that I am not in favor of digital ID. So thanks for clarifying that.
Well, to be quite honest, Biospirit, anytime the question starts with, should the government, my automatic response is no. Mr. Hans.
So I read a bit about digital ID. I don't know the specific version that Stammer is talking about, but the concept is that your authenticated information is in the central database that can be retina scan, it can be fingerprint scan, or other type of information. And then your smartphone can be a digital ID, but also let's say you go to some municipal office, you will be able to digitally identify you by just looking into a camera, and then that app will contact the central database and verify the information. Um, so it is, but this is one of the big drawbacks, is that central database is going to be a big target, especially in a country like South Africa, where you pay someone R5.50 and that person gives you all the information that he has access to. So this is going to be, and those same people are now in every country, in every bureaucracy. So yes, this is absolutely a non-starter for the state of Western civilization right now. It's just going to be exploited to the max. So one of the problems they are trying to let's say the pretext, one of the pretexts, or that they are going to reduce identity theft. But all they're going to do is they're going to put all the identity information in a single place where all these horrible people are going to be able to sell it more efficiently. So yes, this is going to cause chaos. So my advice is, whatever you do, when you have to enter your digital information, try to do it in a way where it won't authenticate. I know, I mean, if I haven't found a phone that can reliably pick my fingerprints up. Even the new MacBook that my employer provided, it's just the fingerprint reader is just I don't know if it's my finger or what's the problem. I cannot get it to reliably authenticate on my fingerprint. I have to always use the password. So yeah, I don't know about Retina. At I worked at a bank, and they had they had this new security feature where everyone had to scan retina before you can go into the onto the floor. But this is a big floor. It's about I mean, thousands of people, and they had that in for one day, and they had so many complaints because all these sweaty people stuffed their face into this thing. It was so disgusting. You had to wipe the thing down every time you push your, yeah. So that didn't last happily.
Story time. I thank you, Hans, for bringing something up. Any system is only as good as the people that's going to be running it, and we can be guaranteed that it's going to be anti-whites and probably anti-white non-whites that are going to be relegated to maintaining and running these systems. And I bring that up because I have gotten no less than 7 freaking letters in the past 10 years from different medical providers where my medical records have been part of some hack. Ever since we've gone to electronic medical records here in the US, and I don't know how it is elsewhere, Julia can, and you can, Hans can probably tell us about that. But if they can't keep the most confidential medical records safe from being hacked, and I can tell you an interesting story from a place my wife worked, who was hacked because my wife being, working in the medical field, their office was hacked. All their patient records were taken and held ransom by some crew, probably in India or Pakistan, and they never did get them back, even though her boss paid the ransom. And all the patients in this office had to start fresh with all new medical records because they were gone forever. But I've gotten 7 letters in the past 9 or 10 years from different medical providers saying, "We sorry, we're going to investigate this and find out how this happened." And every time I get one, I just look at it and go, "Well, the old paper charts didn't get hacked. Somebody had to actually go there and be there in person, and unless they dragged a photocopier in their backpack, they weren't going to copy your medical records." And most people might sit there and go, "Well, what's the big deal? Why is that so important?" Because they're freaking mine and they're personal, and that's all the reason I need to not want my shit hacked. Miss Julia.
So, Hans, you're not alone. My fingerprint is also apparently not easily readable. So, I only have this on my Samsung phone, but it, yeah, it just like doesn't like to read it. It took me like, I don't know, like 20 tries for it to finally like get it read, like to get it 100% read. And then it just doesn't work most of the time. Like it just, I don't know, I have to put it like at a very specific angle. And I, I can never remember the angle. And it's just always faster to do the passcode. So yeah, you're not the only one who struggles with the fingerprint reader things. I'm not a fan. I think the whole retinal scans and fingerprinting, I think that's just kind of a cover, um, and a way to force people to defer to smartphones because people will be like, "Oh, it's such a hassle. I don't want to have to do that. I'd rather just carry a smartphone. I have a smartphone anyway. Why not?" Especially because young people are so glued to their smartphones already. It's just like easier, and people are always going to go for what's more convenient, especially if it involves, having to regularly put your face against something that has to be cleaned um, in between, or that it doesn't function very well, which I'm sure these are. I'm sure they have all that information anyway. It's like when people think that the government doesn't have all our DNA information already. Like, come on, everyone's had blood drawn. And I'm sure that we've all been DNA tested, a genotype. That, to me, that just seems obvious. Um, I understand why people still don't want to get genotyped and have whatever corporation have access to that information. But yeah, I think it's probably already, the government already has it. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Well, for me, it's much like the central bank's digital currency issue. When they can control how much money you have, they can control your behavior. And I find that very scary because, of course, who's going to be making the decisions? Well, mostly anti-whites. If I say something that's heretical to anti-whiteism, do I get my bank account wiped out? Am I not allowed to? Will my will my digital currency not work at the grocery store until I comply and become in compliance? Scary things for me. Mr. Slots, good afternoon. Come on in.
I just wanted to quickly chime in on the discussion. I have lunch here, so I won't be able to speak long. It's getting cold. I just wanted to chime in here for the bio scans, the bio ID. It's always better to, on your digital devices like your phone, use a password or a PIN than to use facial, retinal, or fingerprint. And it's because of the legal protections that you have. You do not have legal protection from them using your fingerprint or your retinal or your face in order to open your phone without your consent. They can do that at any time. Whereas you have Fourth Amendment rights when you have to provide them with a PIN or a password.
Yeah, that's an excellent point to bring up, Slots, and you are so 100% over target. At the end of the day, they can force your hand onto the phone to read a print. They can uh, hold your face still in front of the camera to unlock your phone with your face, but there's no way, unless they torture you, there's no way to get a passcode or a pattern out of you. Mr. Hans.
Well, the fundamental issue with biometrics is that you leave your keys everywhere. Everywhere you leave a fingerprint, everywhere where you did a retina scan, they can save that. So it's like leaving copies of your keys every time you authenticate. That's a fundamental problem. So I understand why it's considered weak security. But I worked at a credit bureau one time, and I looked at my own data, and I was I was surprised to see all the data that they stored, because even if you give permission for someone to do a credit query, that query gets into the database. So that the one thing was, I was surprised at the amount of information that they store. They don't only store changes to your credit or making new loans or things like that. Just looking at the data is stored in the records. But the one thing that was quite funny, they had all my previous addresses on the database. I could recognize the addresses, but you wouldn't actually be able to find that address because the people who typed in the information, it was so horribly done that you wouldn't find those addresses if you so it was bad data, but they definitely made the effort.
Bringing up keys reminds me of something, Hans, that probably most people don't either realize or they should realize. And I bring this up because somebody in a local group had posted a set of keys that they found. Now, just FYI, people can make copies of a key from a photograph. So if you ever find keys and you want to post them, don't don't show the bidding. That's the notches on the keys. Uh, Block those out, because otherwise, somebody will come along and say, "Hey, yeah, those are mine." Well, now I know, who you are. We can figure out where you live. Can make a copy of a key, and that just enables thieves to do very bad things. Mr. Biospirit.
Um, hmm. All very interesting things that people have brought up. I too have a problem with my fingerprint. I only have one device that I use the fingerprint thing on because um, I did it on that device and it's so horrible. I'm always having to put the code in anyway. So every other device that has asked me to use the fingerprint, I have declined. It seems kind of stupid to do it. Um, and now that you guys are talking about it, that like Hans said, you're every time that you do that, you're leaving your you're leaving the code behind. And certainly if these data collection places are collecting your data, they're going to be then collecting your fingerprint and your retinal scan, and then that can be just used to get into your stuff by anybody. So all very interesting uh, uh, things that I really hadn't thought about before, because and I doubt that most of our people think about it, because we are trusting people, and we think that if the government is saying, oh, this is the best thing to do, or even if a corporation is saying, oh, this is the new best thing, most people will go along with it just because we trust. And that's not necessarily the best option anymore.
Good afternoon, Jason. Good to see you. Something else worth considering. Anything you do online that gets stored by these data centers is for sale. Police departments very often don't even bother getting a warrant to get certain information. They can just literally go buy it just as easily, and no warrant necessary. That's something that should make everybody a little nervous. Mr. Hans.
I remember there was a story in the news where this one guy, he made a device that can pull your fingerprint from a glass, and for $2 make a 3D print a fingerprint that defeats most of these fingerprint readers. But now thinking about it, that must be absolute nonsense, because I cannot find a fingerprint reader that works on my real finger. So how is it going to work on a copy?
Well, on the topic of using a pattern lock, something that might interest people. If you've had the phone more than a couple of months, chances are the there's a groove. Now, not enough for you to see, but the right measuring equipment can actually pick up that millionth of an inch groove from where you draw your pattern on your screen. Apparently, that was used in a recent case. Um, the FBI lab was able to recreate the pattern lock on a phone by measuring that tiny bit of wear from where someone's finger went over the same spot. And I thought that was interesting as hell. Um, New Hampshire Patriot. Okay, guess you had nothing else on that topic, Mr. Biospirit.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more story about DNA because Julia brought it up, and um, I really went down the DNA rabbit hole with my hobby, which is doing genealogy. So I'd had all of my family members who are still living DNA tested, um, and I was happily going along. And then it became clear to me at one point that one of my brothers had a different father, and so I I started a 2 week process of trying to figure out who his biological father was, and I was amazed at being able to do it within 2 weeks. And as I was doing the process, I realized that there was almost like a breadcrumb trail coming from another direction. And so when I got to my destination, I found out that his biological father's son had a criminal record, and so I thought, so that probably um, the law enforcement had been trying to figure out who this half brother of my brother's was. They probably had his DNA information, and then they were trying to figure out who he was from that. And the DNA information led to my brother, and so the law enforcement people had kind of figured out the relationship before I had, and it made it much easier going in the opposite direction. So yes, and I've read a lot of the different stories about how they've taken people's DNA off of a glass. They track them, and then they eat in a restaurant and they leave a glass behind and they get a DNA from that, and then they can do the DNA tracking to link them to crimes and all sorts of things now. So that I would kind of agree with you, Julia. It doesn't even matter if your DNA is in the database. It So many people have done, especially white people, have done the DNA tests, and they're just part of these huge databases. And it's very easy as long as you can get like even into the second cousin realm. You can generally figure out who the person you're looking for is, even if they haven't had a DNA test, just based off of regular records that you use. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I find it to be kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because it's good that we can solve the crimes. But me personally, it's an intrusion. Um, but yeah, I see these 23andMe's, and they supposedly for years they told us that we don't keep any of your information. And of course that turned out to be a lie, because they were absolutely storing that stuff, and they were selling that information to whoever wanted it. And that's just kind of how it goes, which makes it, again, all the more important that we return to our Western norms, and then we don't have to worry about things like that so much. Mr. Hans?
So in a scenario, let's say um, where you bleed, let's say you defend yourself, and then you decide to, because in South Africa, if you defend yourself, you are in a world of trouble, because there's almost no scenario where they're not going to charge you for whatever the harm was to the attacker. So, I mean, many people just avoid the whole problem and they just leave. But in the case where you left the DNA behind, what you're saying is they will be able to, with enough family connections, they will be able to narrow it to an extent where they can just say, okay, there's 5 possible people that, and then just come and request your DNA sample. Yes, I can understand. Yeah, that's a serious issue.
Yeah, I mean, picture, say my second cousin goes out and gets in some legal altercation, and then the cops knock on my door looking for my DNA. They're going to get told to go get stuffed. I didn't do anything. Why should I have to give a DNA sample? So that would really irritate me. As much as you want them to solve a crime, the problem is who determines what is a crime, and who determines how that all washes out. Anti-white judges, anti-white juries, anti-white prosecutors in anti-white courts. So I don't trust any of it. What else do we have up here? This is a story from James Goddard. He says they're taking a piss out of us. An Afghan invader celebrates being given refugee status by going on holiday to the country he supposedly fled from. Now, I brought this up because I've seen this so many times here in the U.S. Um, most famously, the Boston Marathon bombing, where the Sirnov brothers were here as refugees, but they had returned to their home country dozens of times. And I asked the question even back then, well, how does that happen? Because if you are here as a refugee and we have gone out of our way to give you refugee status, your passport shouldn't be good to even leave the country. Never mind to return where you're supposedly scared to return to. And if you do return there, then you should lose your refugee status. Uh, Thoughts, Mr. Biospirit?
Yeah, that just perfectly illustrates what Jason always says, is that it's these things like we're helping the refugees is just a smokescreen. What they're doing is actually harming Western kind. They're harming white people in Western countries by flooding our countries with these people. That's the motivation. That's why it's being done. There is nothing about it to help anybody. It's based on harm to white people, and I think nothing shows that more clearly than a situation like this, where a supposed refugee comes to a country of the West and then is repeatedly going back on holiday to the country that they supposedly are terrified to be in. So, yeah, very good example to point out to people that we're being snowed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about harm to us. And if it's harm to us, it is anti-white, and we should absolutely reject the living sauce out of it. I think, too, of all these Afghanistan refugees that came here post Biden's collapse, and how many of them are returning back to holiday in their own country? And of course, Biden, of course, would allow it. I don't know if Trump would be any more enforcement minded on it. Mr. Hans.
Yes, Biospirit, it's called it correctly. It is, but I mean, this is good for people to um, to to generate that outrage that we are being taken advantage of. but this is because um, anti-whites have an answer for this, which is, okay, let's just manage it better to make sure that only the people in need will be let in. So this is not, the ironclad defense. The ironclad defense is, of course, that white erasure, um, any form of white erasure harms the well-being of white people, and we can get into that conversation. Let me count the ways. Um, so that's the ironclad defense, but this is good because it will generate that outrage that we are being taken advantage of, and that the anti-white regime is just has no appetite to address this, because it contradicts their aims.
Now, this story ties in a little bit with the last one I threw up there of the 3 Arabs arrested in Katy, Texas for quote unquote target shooting. And we know a stray round ended up clipping a baseball coach, very narrowly missed the child. These guys aren't here illegally. They're here as refugees. And these are uh, Middle Eastern guys who are, and of course the media paints it as well. They were out target shooting, but that's not how target shooting works. Target shooting is shooting at an actual target. They were out there just, I saw plenty of this in Iraq. They just go out. They think there's miles of open desert. They just blast a few magazines straight off into the sky and don't care where the bullets land. Well, in this case, it very nearly killed a child. It hit a baseball coach. Um, Very anti-white behavior, very clearly harmful to Western kind. Why are they here? Miss Julia.
Sorry, I don't have anything particular to say on that, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me. But it does remind me of how I have seen things like that on the Holly Weird or teen shows, like on the CW, which is basically a network that is targeted at teens and especially teen girls, I would say. And often, I don't know if it's so much anymore, but back in the like 20 years ago, you would see the teens whenever they lived in areas where guns were remotely part of like daily life. You would have obviously the white kids going off and just shooting cans in the middle of nowhere, or just shooting in the middle of nowhere, kind of as described in this scenario. And yeah, they were sometimes pictured very sloppily. So the anti-white narrative at work in our media. So it makes me think of that.
Yeah, the real answer is just simple: anti-whiteism. If we behaved as a people, we would instantly recognize that their presence here is harmful, and we would resist it. I see so many stories on X, and it is hard sometimes not to be a little melancholy about it, but I think that we're going to recapture our destiny because there's very definitely an awakening happening. People, I'm seeing the word anti-white used so much more now, thanks to this community, which has been amazing. And I had shared some in the OT chat, and I think what's happening, this momentum that we're having, is going to eventually lead to the end of that kind of crap. Mr. Hans.
Well, obviously, this is white labeling because they are two of them are labeled as white, and then possibly white pixelating as well because these are the ugliest white people I've ever seen.
Yeah, Hans got ahead of me, but thank you very much for noticing that. That was one of the memes that I had posted several times under this story in various places. Um, Once again, and of course, if I remember right, the coach that was hit was black. So this is going to go on the books, of course, as a white on black shooting. So we're going to get maligned as usual, and even though, of course, it had absolutely nothing to do with us. Mr. Jason, did you want to jump up and grab a mic for a few minutes and bless us with some of your amazing words before we pop smoke for the day? Alrighty, sir. Microphone headed your way. However, it takes X to get to you. I tried to send it express, but that was an extra $10.95 that I didn't have. Let's see how long it takes to get there.
Sean,
Alrighty, it does.
what a
There you go. Go ahead.
magnificent space. I'm so happy that you all were talking about protecting yourselves, this community. We covering all of these different bases of the consequences of anti-whiteism in Western countries, things that we shouldn't have to consider. But the reality is that the kinds of dangers exist and persist across the West because of the anti-white narrative and anti-whiteism that this community is focused on and successfully defeating. But at the same time, you feel, I know, and some of you were even saying it, it feels kind of wrong to have to contemplate. And I think there's a lot of white people out there who just end up ignoring. They don't end up carrying tools of self-defense. They don't end up uh, paying enough mind to their private data and protecting the data. In fact, you'll find white people very often that will argue when it comes to data and this invasion of privacy that, well, they're doing nothing wrong, so they don't care if the government is doing a proctological exam on them. They just don't mind at all. But of course, privacy is not just for criminals. It's not just for the ne'er-do-wells. It's for all of us. And it's part of our norms of the West that are being white erased. And it's one of those things that we mention that benefits everyone who lives in Western countries. As we defeat anti-whiteism, we defeat the eradication of that personal privacy that we all deserve inherently, and we would have if it were Mayberry. It would be a consequence of all of our norms, and we wouldn't have to consider these things. We've all heard the stories from our elders about times when keys are left in the ignition, doors to homes are left unlocked. Even when you go on vacation, everybody's keeping an eye on your place. And what's happened, I mean, you saw this even studied in that infamous book, Bowling Alone, that as society is increasingly white erased and anti-whites and vagues, of course, will call that diversified, as it's increasingly white erased, this problem of selfish individualism in the white race is exacerbated, and potentially anti-whites are very aware of that reality, and yet another motivator to preventing us from defending ourselves against anti-whiteism, to bring in more people. And so many brilliant thoughts as I've just been sitting and listening that so many of you have been sharing. It's a real honor to be a part of this community and stand shoulder to shoulder and work with all of you to arrest that victimization. But yet, so true. We have these scenarios now where you can have a bunch of white guys who are swarthy as all hell and were just weeks ago riding camels across the desert, pulling out firearms and shooting randomly into suburban areas where little league and games are going to be played, t-ball games are going to be played, where there should be nothing but smiles and wonderful memories being made among the families there. And instead you have bullets clipping people. And this is not the first time that stray bullets. Growing up, one of the first things that you learn when you are introduced to firearms, especially in the Southern Virginia in particular, is where's that bullet traveling? What is it traveling into? Where is it going to go after it hits its mark? Is its momentum going to be arrested there? Or is there a possibility of ricochet and therefore, hitting somebody or an animal or property or anything like that? These kinds of things are not considerations. I mean, for the love of God, they will have weddings, and everybody has seen this, and they'll be firing the AK-47s, of course, not invented by them, but the firing the AK-47s into the air, and occasionally they hit each other. And where the tradition continues, maybe Allah willed it, but all of these end up having these changes, having this corrosive effect, worrying about our fingerprints, worrying about our retinal scans, worrying about the house being broken into, worrying, do you get a giant Rottweiler, or do you get surveillance, or do you have both? This is all taking away from a life that we only get one to live. And these are the kind of things that we really need to talk about. And I think new people coming to the space, they need to hear white people talking about and concerning themselves with. Number one, they're going to be able to get some tips on, hey, what can I do? What are some, and not from cranks, people who, real ordinary white folk, living their lives, have jobs, or they're retired, or they're in school, or whatever it is. Ordinary white folks who are living their lives, normal members of their community, who are not going to be, neck deep in some sort of bizarre martial art that you go and train in the Himalayas or something and learn, and then you can bring that back to your community, and it's completely ineffective and can't be used anywhere in society. No, it's regular folks. It's regular tips I was hearing, and a lot of input. I mean, the digital ID, and knowing that that's going to be in your cell phone, which means that gives the government access to everything in the cell phone and everything the cell phone can do, which is record video, record sound, and plenty of other things as well. All of these things, threats to personal safety and your privacy, and then to take this conversation from, hey, here are the things you should know that the government or that the producers of these products, like cell phones and the supposed like ease of being able to do things with retinal scans and fingerprints, information there that you should know, information you should know about things that you might carry on you. I know earlier, for a brief second, I heard about the flashlights. I heard about somebody probably said something about carrying firearms I didn't catch, but there's all of that. And then the most important thing is the impact, the effect it has on us having to live lives like this, having to be concerned about things like this. And we can look to places, so many of our cities, and of course, South Africa being a great and horrific example of environments where you've surrounded your home in chain link and razor wire, and you have massive dogs that you have to be around, and you never know when they might turn on you, so that they could go and maybe engage some human animals coming to rape and murder. And this is just not this is the subject and the injury to our lived experience, our daily lives, that we need to be talking about, rather than abstractions, rather than these socio-political musings about the white race in this economic example, or the white race in this perfect or slightly flawed in these ways system of governance. All of this is inapplicable to the average person, to the real person, to the folks that we need to bring to white well-being. So just really a big salute. Every time I show up and I listen to what you all have to say, I'm always educated and entertained. This is such a wonderful space. I'm so happy you all get together and nearly daily and share this information. I'll do anything I can to bring more people to the conversation in the shade tree. But yeah, thank you so much also for letting me have the mic here. I don't have to jump off right away, so whenever you all wrap it up, I'll just wrap it up with you all.
Yeah, Jason, you brought up something pretty important. We talk pretty often in this space, and I know you talk in the stream. Our Western standards, our Western norms, they're not universally held beliefs. We talk about our standards of how we keep our communities, our standards of things like consent for sex, but very importantly, our standards of firearm handling are not universally held beliefs. As I said, I've witnessed personally many occasions of just the wild gunfire out into the desert. That, of course, flies completely against the standards that we've set for ourselves. Great people who founded the NRA, for example, and founded the Gun Owners Action League, and the guys who laid the groundwork for all the firearms safety rules that we use today, did so. Every rule of that type is based in blood. There was a good reason never to shoot at something if you didn't know what lies beyond. Have a clear sight picture in making sure your weapon's clear when you're done. These are all rules created for a very good reason, but they're not universally held. Mr. Hans.
Just on that, one of my friends, his father, was banned for life from a shooting range because he brought alcohol to the shooting range. And this is an example of having Western standards where this is an absolute standard, and if you ignore that, you're gone.
Yeah, that's an excellent example, Hans, and that's one that even me and among my friends when we would not necessarily go to a range, but we'd go out to the woods and mess around with guns. When the booze comes out, the guns went away. That was a rule that everybody followed. We never questioned it. No one ever argued it because we just knew that was the smart thing to do. Because drunk people with guns can do dumb things. It's bad enough that sober people with guns sometimes do dumb things. So that's a really good example. Mr. Biospirit.
Um, I don't really have anything to add to that. I'll let Julia go.
Biospirit chooses to pass. Over to Julia.
Yeah, so neither of my parents grew up with weapons, or firearms at least. And they, even my dads didn't carry. I have two dads. It's a long story. They're not gay. It's complicated, but yeah, not like that. Um, they didn't even carry pocket knives really. And I think growing up in Massachusetts probably didn't help. But the best gift that I ever received was from this great guy that I dated, for a birthday present. He took me to a shooting range for the first time. And what an amazing gift to get. I had always been interested in firearms and self protection, and unfortunately, I don't remember very much of it because it happened to be like the coldest day of the year, and in the middle of yeah, it was in February, and as an early birthday present, and yeah, it was very very cold. So but what I do remember was that of course I had terrible like trigger safety. Like I kept putting my finger, keeping it on the trigger and not keeping it away, and I just, obviously it's so much easier to learn those types of basic firearm safety lessons when you're younger, to have that drilled into you at an early age. And um, I mean, I'm glad that I learned when I did, but yeah, certainly for my own children, it's something that um, needs to be learned as early as they show themselves to be capable of handling anything like that. So yeah, I think I think it's really lucky to be able to grow up with around firearms and to have that built-in knowledge, especially safety. Uh, Very much Western norm.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Julia. And the other thing too, of course, is being as I was, raised around firearms. I remember first time I shot anything, I was 5 years old, and of course, having that kind of an upbringing, as I got older and went over to friends' houses and they had guns, it hit a whole lot different. I certainly never felt a need to tinker with their guns because I was already familiar. And if they, of course, brought anything out, I would have understood how to safely handle it versus a lot of what we see today, where children who have no idea about guns apart from video games and they get overly curious, and many of our children get hurt and sometimes killed tinkering with guns because, of course, it's a curiosity item. Very often that which is tabooed becomes you become even more curious about it. So I think, and I think we had said this in this space maybe a couple of weeks ago. In my view, firearm safety should be something taught annually from kindergarten on up, because it would reduce the number of hopefully it would reduce the number of fatalities. Because back when I was in school, there was such a culture where you could even, as long as it was unloaded, you could bring your gun to school for show and tell, and that was a perfectly normal thing. But of course, this is in a white school back when we enforced our Western norms, and it didn't have to be said that if you misbehaved with it, you would lose it and face very harsh consequences. Something that we just don't seem to do anymore. Mr. Blue Flame, good afternoon. Good to see you. Come on in.
Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, I only heard like the tail end about firearms. So yeah, and actually, guys, I'm just throwing it in there. The chances of me joining in later are gonna be more common these days. You know, life getting in the way, but still happy to come here when I can. Um, yeah, as far as firearm safety and all of that stuff goes, I mean, I never really grew up with any um teachings in any of that regard. I do not know much about it. Not that I lack, I guess, a boy's or a man's interest in these things, but it just never came to be. And I even have some some military men in my family, and who never taught me. And it's you look back at that and you wonder why. But some these men are dead now, so that's also that. I guess. But I did do some for a hobby. I did do some well, a hobby with a martial aspect to it, and that was more so oriented around uh, I guess, what do they call it in English? Melee weaponry, axes, staves, that sort of thing. Because yeah, it was just a good time, and it wasn't only for that, but I have yeah, I have some experience in that. And when I hear you guys talk about what do you bear in mind, keeping away alcohol, etc., etc., it's like it's basically the same thing in that sense, though. So maybe I did get somewhat of teachings in that respect by the men who were longer into it. Um, yeah. Now, as most of you know, I'm from Europe, and uh, the the ability to defend yourself, to have arms as that is in the US, that has been seriously curbed. Um, it varies from one country to the other. It doesn't mean that the European populations, you really need to look from country to country. It's not necessarily what do you call that? Like, yeah, the continent of Europe. or the EU, if you will, they do not always have a say in that, or not as much as they like, I suppose. But yeah, when it comes to that, uh, there is still some of that left, if you will. When it comes to hunting rifles, etc., etc., you still can get permits for that in most nations, and as far as I'm aware, at least. And then there's a little aspect of that left, but I do, how shall one put it? Yeah, maybe I'm going a bit too much on a tangent if I if I make it more so about the societal purposes of all of that. If it depends on, yeah, or is anyone interested into going in that direction, or is the conversation meant to go somewhere else with that? Maybe I should ask that first.
Well, the conversations always tend to drift, so that's not really a huge problem. But I did want to comment. It's interesting because I hear very often, people think of the Northeast, they think of anti-whiteism and white erasure. They think of quote unquote liberalism. But I got to tell you, it's not really like that. Certainly, most of Maine, most of New Hampshire, and say the western part of Massachusetts is pretty much just like living down south in terms of the gun culture, and it's really much more rural than people imagine. I think like when people think of Massachusetts, they think of Boston, but Boston is, of course, on the very farthest east coast, but the western part of the state does encompass the tail end of the Appalachians, and it's a whole other world out there with banjos and bluegrass, and it's very Appalachie. Gibbs would feel right at home, for example. I just wanted to throw that in there. Ms. Julia?
I just wanted to correct the blue flame that at least in Germany, you cannot get a hunting rifle. So the only reason you can have a gun here is basically because you inherited it, or because you do shooting just like for fun as a hobby. Um, but otherwise, but on the you can only have the gun like in your car if you're currently on the way to shooting practice, and it has to be, of course, completely disassembled and unloaded and all that. And you don't have a right to use it to defend yourself at home unless you are under in mortal peril yourself. And the person also has a weapon of a firearm essentially. So it's basically useless having a gun here. And the hunting is all done by government appointed hunters who rule like each little regions, like little fiefdoms. The hunter in my area, I have a big chunk of land, and so he and I sometimes butt heads because he's been the hunter there for like his whole life, and he's at least in his 60s, probably maybe in his 70s, and he doesn't like that I have fences because I have sheep and things like that. So anyway, but coming to live in Germany after growing up in the US, it's weird. When I was in the US, I never really felt like an American because I'm not an American citizen. I have a permanent green card. And both my parents were permanent residents, but they were both immigrants to the US. And I never felt American. But then moving to Germany, I realized I really am way more American than I am European. I mean, I'm still a mix, and it works out very well for advocacy for white well-being because I really do feel um, like that ring of roses around the earth because I have Australian. I mean, I have heritage really everywhere where white people are, and I really do feel connected to all of those places. But in terms of like what my spirit feels like, I realize now how American it is in terms of uh, the freedom values and things like that. right to bear arms, freedom of speech. I mean, America really is the best country in the world, and I say that as someone who has lived in several countries and visited many more, um, just because of the mindset and because I think the best of Europe has been emigrating to the US for centuries now. And so what's left in Europe is like a very weakened population. Like just those without the spirit of adventure, those who were willing to be compliant, those um, who also just didn't accrue wealth maybe as well. So maybe not as hardworking. Although we still have a lot of hard workers here, will say we have that at least. But it's just such an alien mindset. So many in Europe, especially in Germany, it's like a different species almost, or like a different. It's like it's strange. The difference is, I think, the biggest between Americans and Germans, which it should not be because I don't think Germans and Americans were that different, even like 100 years ago. But because of what's happened and because of how Germany has been targeted for white erasure for obvious reasons, it's just been it's just so downhill.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Julia, because one of the things that comes to my mind, of course, is we do have a big gun culture here in the U.S., and I don't think many Americans who sit here and very often are critical of Europe of, well, they should have kept their guns and they don't know about guns and all this, and perhaps Jason will speak on this in a few minutes here. You end up with a competition where people have to realize that we're all Western kind and we're all kind of in the same fight. But to the point, Europe also, up until recently, until all the gun bans, had a very vivid gun culture as well. A lot of the technology that we use in the firearms today were developed in Europe in various shades of Western countries. So to say that firearms are a uniquely American thing, it might be somewhat truer now, but that wasn't always the case. There's still many fine gun makers in Europe. Some of the most expensive and exquisite firearms in existence are still made in Europe by small, craft gun shops. Mr. Hans.
So they I just want to mention that there are quite a lot of silly regulations or laws regarding self-defense, and I know it's not only a South African thing because I've read about the FBI exploiting some of these silly things in the laws to get at people. One such thing in our firearm legislation is you it's the principle of minimum violence. So you are only allowed to use deadly force if there's no other way to stop someone from losing from imminent death. So there's a lot of room for the state to attack you. Um, um, so, for instance, this one, the wife of someone that I know, she emptied. They were her husband was attacked in the night, and she got hold of the revolver and she emptied it into the one of them. And what she told me was that the perpetrator, the attacker, got up 5 times, and that's the only thing she could have said to not be charged. And this is the way you know, you have to be cognizant of these things. Another thing is, um, if you are if you are under the influence, and that means I think 0.08% or something like that, you're not allowed to defend yourself. So this is absolutely silly, because um, the only valid defense is when your life is in imminent danger. So that's another example of a law. And someone that I met at church, he was and this is something that happens quite a lot. I mean, quite a lot in terms of the percentage of attacks. Typically happens when you have guests. And in this case, the man was, they were barbecuing. It was dark, and three armed individuals approached them from different directions. He got up, shot and killed three of them. And it's now been 2 years in and out of courts because he had alcohol in his system. And this is totally ridiculous. But this is something that you have to. I used to think that, well, this is a silly rule. They're not going to apply it. But they absolutely are. They exploit anything. You are going to get charged, first of all, even if it's obvious that you are not guilty. And then they're going to use every law that they can, they're going to use against you. So that's something. So you need to do everything by the book, and you need to get your story straight. And unfortunately, that means that you need to get your story, the one story that they want to hear. um yeah, so life is not fair, and this is the reality.
Yeah, indeed. Systemic anti-whiteism is a huge problem. Even here, it shouldn't matter who you're defending yourself from, but of course, unfortunately, it does, because you're going to be going against you're going to be in an anti-white court with a whiter race judge, a whiter race jury, a whiter race prosecutor. So you better make sure that you've used the minimum amount of force necessary to secure your safety, or you probably are screwed. Even at the best of chances, you've got a 10% chance of conviction anyway. Mr. Fornell, good afternoon.
Oh, hey. Good afternoon. I don't really have anything to add. I just was setting up the mic in case I did want to add something. We already and I'm not even sure what the exact topic is. I heard everyone talking about guns and the right to self-defense and things like that, but I'm not really sure what the official topic is.
Well, that makes two of us. No, actually, we started off talking about Zippos, and that morphed into the things we carry every day. We covered digital IDs in Europe, and then we worked into refugees who take vacations to the places they're refuging from, which led into the shooting in Katy, Texas, with that was the Little League team, and of course, the white refugees, as they're listed by.
Oh gosh.
Thanks to white labeling, which kind of circled back around to guns and self-defense. So the floor is yours if you want it. You can play or pass.
Well, I'll just say that in California, we started out great, like a lot of the rest of the country. You got castle doctrine here. You in the smaller counties, you can open carry in some places. You can open carry a blade still. I mean, as a kid, I lived in a Central Valley, but like rural area. All the boys, we walked around with our buck knives and stuff. I mean, that was like a symbol. And even as an adult, I would, open carry a knife for a lot of my life. But yeah, now under the pretense of, what do they call it? Equitable justice. Now they're probably ruling cases differently. They're probably saying, "Oh, the white person was afraid because it's a black person," or that this was just an excuse to victimize somebody who broke into their house and or was causing harming people. And so anyways, yeah, it's sad to see our right to self-defense eroded away, but we still technically we still have it here in California. And like I said, many of the counties are not like the big cities. It's very much that spirit of the Wild West. We love our Western heroes and all that kind of stuff in the smaller places, but yeah, so much of it white erased now. Yeah, you can't count on a judge ruling in the spirit of the law. They're probably just going to be the anti-white justice or injustice. That's all I have.
Yeah, we talked earlier about, as a young man, I carried a folding buck for the longest time. Unless I was headed out into the woods, I carried a 6-inch buck 119 belt carried. If I was going anywhere off into the woods, that was just kind of normal. Every boy between 5 and adulthood just automatically carried a knife, matches, a lighter, just different masculine accoutrements, I would call them. And how that's very much white erased. I think if you grabbed the average 20 kids today, maybe one has any one of those things. But Mr. Hans, you had your hand up.
Oh, I don't. I just wanted to say, of course, don't talk to the police if something happens. Get your legal representative. Fortunately, we have a lawyer in the family, so I'm fortunate in that way. But especially after something horrible that happened, because you're not going to have all your marbles together. So just be friendly and say, I would love to answer that, but I just need my representative.
I will couch that. That is good advice, Hans, but I will couch that. Don't generally talk to the police. Wait, ask for your lawyer, except if there is exculpatory evidence that they should have. Always make sure to mention that. If you were shot at, you may definitely want to mention that I was shot at. You don't have to elaborate, but then they know to look for a shell casing to prove that you were indeed shot at. So if you can make exculpatory statements that bring evidence in your favor, and this is something Andrew Branca talks about in his courses, you definitely want to get exculpatory information there. Otherwise, claim up. Mr. Biospirit.
Yeah, I was thinking about how anti-whites are making laws all the time, which most of our people aren't even aware of. And I was thinking of that young woman in, I forget which European country it was, whether it was Germany or France or England, and she defended herself from a rapist with pepper spray. And for some bizarre reason, they've made pepper spray illegal. in that country, and she was charged and convicted of attacking her attacker, which is just so counter to our way of thinking, that you should be able to defend yourself. And what does it matter that you used pepper spray or scratched his eyes out with your fingernails? You should be able to fight off a person who is attacking you. But the anti-whites have been eliminating that as much as they can, more and more and more across the West. So as much as you may think that you have a legal right to this, that, the other thing, exactly what Hans was just saying, don't necessarily expect that the way that you're feeling it, or the way that it went down, is the way that you should be necessarily presenting it to law enforcement, who are then going to present it to a court of what you said. Always get a, a person who is familiar with the legal complexities that are now placed in front of us because of anti-whiteism before you say anything, and make sure that you don't say something that, like for that poor unfortunate woman, sent her to jail, which was certainly not in our Western tradition.
Well, that's a perfect example right there of, I will once again point out, this is why the law self-defense course comes in really handy in knowing what you can and can't do. I know that the basic course is free. You know, it's money well spent. It's free, and it gives you a really good outline on the 5 elements of self-defense. Because I actually remember a case about 20 years ago. There was a woman in Massachusetts who was raped, maced her attacker, and then got charged with unlawful possession of the mace, which is, of course, very insulting even now. But it's interesting, of course, now I think you can carry mace without a permit even there. So, you know, she actually ended up with like 2 years of probation for defending herself. That's how outrageous can you be? And it was an anti-white prosecutor, an anti-white judge, and an anti-white jury. Good afternoon, Corbus. Come on in.
Hey, thanks for having me up. The tree, Godfather, good space. Yeah, I just had a couple comments I wanted to make on. I hope it's still on topic, but you know, I do hear it in a lot of spaces where people will say, "Well, you know, Europe's cooked because they don't have the Second Amendment, or Canada and all this," you know, and I just disagree with that. You know, I am from the United States. I'm in Montana, and yeah, I do like guns. I like gun culture. But you know, it isn't up to the tools, though they are useful, of course. But no, it's going to be the first white nation that, you know, stands up and takes its own side, just as every other species, every other subspecies in the world does. Right? If we just can get back to taking our own side, there'll be nothing that stands in our way. And we prioritize our own people. You know, I mean, it's just like my kids that I have. You know, yeah, I teach them gun safety and want them to be introduced into that in a safe way and in a healthy way. But it's also, you know, I see more important to teach them about their history, right? What we've accomplished, what we've done, what sets us apart from other people's, and just learn to appreciate their own people. You know, I just see that as so much more important than the gun thing. Yes, it is a tool that it can be useful, but at this point, that is not what's going to save us. You know. And then I also just wanted to make a comment. I heard somebody say, I think, and they said it respectfully, but you know that Europeans didn't. People, the whites that are in Europe, maybe they don't have that sensitive of adventure, but you know. And I would just say that, yeah, I lived 10 years in France in the Alps, and I'll tell you what, like there is still that sense of adventure. Those people that pioneered how to the French technique of climbing, and those guys in the mountains there, the Europeans that live in the Alps, that adventure up on peaks. Why? Because we can, right? Why did we go to Nepal, right? I mean, the people that were indigenous there, they looked up at Mount Everest and they stared at it for a long time, but it was an Englishman, Sir Edmund Hillary, who finally went there and said, "I'm going to conquer that just because I can." So I do believe that the adventurous spirit in the European people there is still there, strong. Yes, I think because a lot of them are the majority of the population, lives in cities and urban areas, and so maybe that's not why we see it as much. We have more rural areas here, but that's all I wanted to comment on, and appreciate the space. I got to get back to work, so I'll probably drop down here shortly.
Well, that's very beautifully put, Corvus. And yeah, that's why in this community we don't uh, worry so much about national borders or this country versus that country. We are all various shades of Western kind. We can appreciate all our different flavors. We've all got great accomplishments. The Germans, the French, our Italian, Norwegians in seafaring, and our American men of the West. We start the space every morning. Yeah, every morning. We start every space with celebrating a man of the West and from all over the world, from South Africa to Europe to America and Canada. It doesn't matter. We are Western kind. We are a wonderful people, and our children, as Jason would say, are no less valuable than anyone else's. We don't. There's no cosmic measuring stick. No people are better than another, but we're not immoral for preferring to see ourselves, our biospiritual expression into the world expressed back at us when we go out. And there's absolutely nothing immoral about that. Uh, Everybody else has a feeling of peoplehood. They work as the people to achieve individual well-being by way of group well-being. And hopefully, whites will begin to understand we need to do the same thing. You're right. We're not going to shoot our way out of this mess. We're not going to vote our way out of this mess. The only way it's going to happen is by becoming a people. So very well put, Mr. Corvus. Miss Julia.
Yeah, so since I was the one talking about the differences that I have observed in Europe versus the US, it is of course variable, and Germany is particularly bad. Like it is the worst in Europe in my personal experience at least. There's still a lot of masculinity to be found in Eastern Europe, even in Spain. I and France, although it's been quite some time since I've been to France, but France always had a stronger sense of masculinity in my lifetime than most of Germany. Interestingly, it's like a different expression. Of course, it's a different vibe, maybe, but they are very comfortable with their masculinity in a way that Germans are kind of a little modern Germans. Not to I'm not trying to speak badly of my German heritage because I'm very proud of it. It's very much a modern thing that I think is a product of anti-whiteism, um, more than anything else. But I do think there is an effect. There has been a dysgenic effect as well, just because of emigration and of course the world wars killing so many of the best of our men. Um, but I of course there's still great men and women in Europe, uh, but they tend to be more concentrated in areas other than Germany. So I encounter a lot of based Serbians, for example. Finnish people tend to be very based. Um, it's just not so much Germany. So that's a little disclaimer. And of course, other people may have different experiences. I agree. There's a difference between a big difference between rural and urban. But I live in a very rural area in Germany, but it's in West Germany. Yeah, and I think that is really the key. West Germany has just been so targeted by the anti-whites. Um, I have not spent much time in Eastern Germany, but even just in Berlin, even though it is a very white race city, it is uh, whiter and palpably more mm, truly German, I would say, than any of the other cities in Germany that I have been to. At least I have not been to all of the cities in Germany, not even all the major cities, or at least not as an adult. But the people I know who live in Eastern Germany are, especially those who were under communism, are much more based. So, and a lot of them have a very an attitude that Jason would really admire, where they refuse to leave because Germany is their homeland and they would never give it up to anyone. And um, I admire them for that. It's I'm in a weird situation because I feel kind of pulled in all these different directions, having parents from different continents, having been raised on a third separate continent from where my parents are from, and living in multiple places. So um, I kind of feel like I'm allowed to go wherever I feel most at home because of that. But um, I do admire the Europeans who are fighting for Europe, and I consider myself one of those as well, regardless of where I reside. And I don't think Europe is cooked. Um, I hate that type of fatalism. It's never over till it's over, and we've faced overwhelming odds so many times. Um, I think it's going to get ugly, but I think we will come through because we have to, because it's an existential crisis, and because we're the best. In my opinion, just in my opinion. And our men are exemplary when it's down to the wire, and that includes even a lot of the men in Germany who don't seem very masculine currently. I think that if it comes down to it, they will step up.
Corvus?
Yeah, Julia, and I didn't see you like attacking or people over there at all. I understood where you're coming from. I just wanted to, put my opinion out there, my experience, as you spoke to. It's important that we all have different experiences. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the reason why we see, the difference in culture and the people and the way it, between the United States and Europe is just because what they went through with the world wars over there was so there was just so much trauma involved there, right? And then just so much propaganda that it really, had a massive effect. But I'll say something positive about Europe that I wish that that I that I know that we will have to overcome here is their relationship with food over there, right? They have this deep tied culture to their food. Like, I mean, in France, if you take grapes from the wrong region and make wine and you call it something else, I think you could go to prison still to this day, or you take milk from a different region and make certain cheeses or whatever. Like, they have very strict rules on their food. They have a deep appreciation for food that isn't just as it can be seen sometimes here in the United States. It's just it's like almost can be seen as like entertainment and just another product to be sold by the capitalists, right, to people of this mass consumption. And oh yeah, we get a great look how big this plate of food is, and look how big my drink is, and so that is something that my time over there that I really gained appreciation for was their cultural connection to what they put in their bodies and their food, and just a long history of it. And yeah, I'll just leave that there. Thank you.
No, that's a great observation, Corvus. And that actually reminds me of a question I kept meaning to ask Julia. Um, I'll throw it out, and if you can figure out the answer, Julia, you can DM it to me. But there, right around Gummersbach, apparently there's a potato soup that's like a regional specialty. If you can come up with a really good recipe for it, I will love you forever. Julia.
Well, I can't think of. I mean, there are potato soups that are. You'd have to be more specific, but because there's so many. The food culture in Germany is very rich, and if you can find like, obviously in Germany there's lots of great German food restaurants, and but yeah, it is very much regional. So I would need to know a little more details. Like, does it have ham in it, or does it not have ham in it? In particular, um, is it pureed? Is it not pureed? Things like that. But yeah, tell me about the soup, and if if I can't find it, which I probably can, I can probably recreate it somehow anyway. Cooking is one of my passions, so I knew where Corvus was going. I knew he was going to go to food, and he's 100% right. Um, I am particularly sensitive to this because I grew up eating organic food, and as a result, I am particularly um, prone to getting sick if I eat too many pesticides. Like, I'm hypersensitive to them essentially. So I, before we figured this out, we would spend every Christmas in Australia because my mother is Australian, and I have a lot of family over there. And it was, of course, summer there, and I would eat a ton of the fresh tropical fruit, and I would get super, super sick, like uh, bronchitis, pneumonia, um, requiring me to be on like breathing machines, like really, really sick. And it happened every time, like clockwork. And it was the high pesticide residue in the fruit. Um, because they didn't even have organic as a standard back then, in the 80s and 90s, and it was like barely starting to be a thing like in the early 2000s even. So yeah, and in the US same thing, like I so in the US and Australia, basically everywhere. I haven't spent enough time elsewhere, but in the, the Australia and the US, if I don't eat organic, I will get sick. Like, even if I have, like, let's say like the largest um latte or whatever that they make at Starbucks in the US, I will have like the beginnings of like a sore throat type of thing. Like, it's not, and if I keep doing it, then I will eventually get sick. It's worse with like dairy. There's the dirty dozen, if people are familiar with those, and things like that. But then here in Europe, I can eat conventional food and I'm fine. And of course, we have our own standard for organic here called bio, which is short for biologic, or and that is a much higher standard than especially USDA has really degraded. But the bio stuff here is amazing quality, and yeah, you can, they also have many heirloom varietals. Like, I've been able to accumulate so many old seeds and like types of squashes. Like, I love squash. um and apples that you never heard of in the US, um that I'm hoping to be able to bring back with me to the US. Um because yeah, there is a deep tie here to food, and people tend to eat much less processed food, and I think also because of how urban it is, there's a lot more walking as well. So it's just there tends to be a bit of a healthier lifestyle over here, in modern times at least. But um one thing I have mixed feelings on is, so the EU regulates a lot of things, and then obviously member countries do as well, such as food additives, right? So dyes and high fructose corn syrup and growth hormones, antibiotics, things like that are regulated in a manner here which they are not in the US. And I'm generally anti big government, so I would wish that everyone just bought from local farmers or homesteaded as much as they could, which is what I do. And but they also do this with plastics and things like that. So if you buy a sofa here, for example, they are only allowed to use certain types of foam which are less toxic than other types of foam. They're still toxic. It's just like less toxic. But they do a little bit of safety testing for plastic toxicity, which is more than the U.S. does. Like everything in the U.S. is just like deemed grass, generally regarded as safe, without any testing. Like that's the default, and that's a real shame, I think. Um, but I don't know how to feel about the regulation aspect, because things are very, very over regulated in Europe in general, and that has a big stifling effect. So it's hard to say.
Well, you know me, Julie, I'm used to growing most of what I eat, so I'm not really, I wouldn't say I'm a food snob, but I'm more particular than people would think. Mr. Jason.
Going to have to jump here in just a minute. So I just wanted to jump in quickly and share a thought before I go. When it comes to talking about the right to self-defense and the ownership of these tools of firearms in the United States, this conversation, almost every single time that we have it with our friends, family, and strangers, we need to mention that if the United States did not have its right to self-defense, if the country was not armed to the teeth, the kinds of things that anti-whiteism would have already done to the white race across the rest of the world would be unspeakable. It is because the United States is armed to the teeth that anti-whites of all races haven't already carried out uh, exquisite victimization of our people around the world. It is the reason why the hand of the anti-whites running the government in South Africa haven't already liquidated the white population, which is something they have been keen to do for many years now. They know, anti-whites know of all races, that the moment that happens anywhere else, America would change overnight. The white population would see what was coming for them with a lucidity with which the anti-whites would not be able to talk them out of it. So this right to self-defense in the United States is really what's holding back the atrocities that anti-whites on a global scale would be committing against our people. One can easily envision an anti-white governance, an anti-white military effort with a smattering of white freaks, anti-white freaks in the leadership that themselves would, of course, be later liquidated after the majority of the population had either been poisoned, killed, starved to death, brought to some sort of heel so there could never be any sort of resistance in the future. Having said that, what we say here all the time persists, which is that we're not going to recapture our destiny by voting or violence. The the social morality of the West comes before. It is the soil, it is the root, it is the essence of which everything else must grow. Everything else does grow. Comes before the socio-political element, and more importantly, violence that could at any point and at any place that would be efficacious in some way for our well-being at any point. It's not possible now, but at any point in the future, it may be possible here or there. The only way that it could ever be efficacious is with an identity. If we don't have an identity, it's just terrorism. It's just a person here or there, and that is very easy to squash. It can be a nuisance. It can be irritating to anti-whites in power, but it, in the end, cannot be victorious for our people. This is obvious. You learn from the history of this around the world. So, really important subject to discuss when we're talking about the right to self-defense, firearms, and the protection of our people around the world. It's kind of holding back the liquidation, and at the same time can't retake that same tool, can't retake territory. Final thing I'll say is on speaking with law enforcement, obviously, both Godfather and Hans shared, they're both right as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, it just depends on context. If you were just shot at or something like that and the police show up, they need the information to address the situation and arrest the person shooting at you or who had just punched you in the face and or stabbed you or something. You need to give them that information. At the same time, when it comes to speaking with law enforcement, when they come to your home or they approach you on the street about, for example, white well-being, then absolutely do not speak with them. It can only end up redounding in some harm to you, but be very polite and say that you are happy to speak with them through your attorney. Can you have their contact information, a card? And then just keep repeating that, because what you have to keep in mind is, what will this conversation sound like in a courtroom? And ultimately, one of the things that's so beautiful about going free is that our conversations in front of a jury, in front of a judge or a panel of judges, is something that is going to sound good when we're speaking from our hearts and we're living that example in our lives. And we're doing it week after week, month after month, year after year. Everybody who's showing up and supporting me and what I've been doing for decades, you have that behind you as well. Why would you be here supporting a guy who's been doing the exact same thing for decades, focused on white well-being, if that was not your intent as well? No desire to bring harm to anybody else. That obviously, whether it's going to be in a courtroom or it's going to be an anti-white lynching at work or at school or something of this nature, and they're going to bring you before some anti-white tribunal, that's the kind of conversation you want to be able to have. That's going to be the one that's going to protect you the most, the least likely to result in the anti-whites getting bloodthirsty and delighted at being able to crucify you as one of the villains in their narrative. But it's been a great conversation, and a big salute to everybody. Everybody talking has shared some really brilliant points. And I'm going to try to be in these spaces a little more often. But God bless you all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Well, great to see you, Jason. I love it when you pop into spaces. And to kind of tail what you just said, it's a good time to point out this community has had victories with police departments in courts. So, that's certainly something worth keeping in mind. Probably the only community that has. Mr. Blue Flame.
Line that I used, and I was in a direct confrontation with someone. Um, there was actually this discussion going on, and it was just a few people who were arguing about the right to self-defense and the tools to be used for that. And it kind of just came out of me. So one female said, it's like, nobody should have any arms. Nobody, even though it's like, yeah, but what about the criminals who will get them, one way or the other, and then what? It's like, well, that doesn't matter. No one should have it. And I just asked her, like, kind of bluntly, also, it's like, so what are you planning to do to people? And that's all I asked her. What are you planning to do to people? And she shut up, guys. She didn't say a word anymore. She was done. And I think that is the only reason I share it is because maybe might be worth for those who want to and who can, if you get the opportunity, maybe try that line and see if it isn't like something that can be used. Not really a curative, I guess. It's not really. It's not necessarily directly suitable for the lexicon, but I think it could be a helpful little addition, because you're asking them directly. It's like, are you one of these creeps who want to deny people their means of self-defense so you can hurt them? I mean, that's essentially what that question asks from someone. And if they truly harbor like some intent to inflict something on someone else, whatever it's going to be. It's like, well, that's, I guess, a bit of a giveaway when they get very quiet all of a sudden. The interesting part in that is, that it is a conversation ender, but I think it has, yeah, it puts these people in a bad light, or it makes everyone else really aware of them. It's like, actually, why did he or she just suddenly stop talking when asked that? What's going on here? What's wrong with this person? What? They lose their their moral footstool that they're standing on. You kind of just like push it right out from underneath them. So it's like, what do you plan to do to people then? Just wanted to share that. But I'm also gonna go, guys. I still have some stuff to do. So I'll talk to you all later. Bye bye.
Thank you, Blue Flame, for popping by. And thank you for all of you listeners who have popped in. We usually name them off as they get here, but there's been so many on here and on YouTube, I haven't been able to keep up, to be honest. As we get ready to wrap things up here, I'll point you to the last thing in the Jumbotron. That's the first dot all the way to the left. I always like to leave you with a smile, and, well, laughing and giggling babies are kind of my soft spot. So here's a post from Ivar Anderson, and it's just a baby laughing, but I'll tell you, this thing is funny, and it almost had me in tears, because a young mother with a beautiful baby, to me, is probably one of the most beautiful sights on earth. It's been a great space. I think we've had a lot of good conversation. We've had a lot of good people jump up to the mic. New Hampshire Patriot, thank you. Corvus, thank you. Slots, if you're still here somewhere, thank you. And with that, I think I'm going to send this around for final thoughts, and well, I'll get out of here. I'll start with my friend, the great 4-0.
Uh-oh, I'm on the spot here. I have not much to add. I just, something I was thinking of when we were talking about self-defense, is, we have to be mindful that any weapon, it can easily become your victimizer's weapon if you don't know what the hell you're doing. So that is one thing to always be mindful of if you are gonna carry a weapon around with you. Is just, be really careful and know how to keep a hold of it, because like I said, carry a knife, whatever, that can, if you don't know what you're doing, that becomes the other guy's weapon, and you're left empty handed. So other than that, thanks for the space.
Thank you for stopping by, and a very great point. And I can think of no better examples than Officer Michael Chesna, who was killed in, I believe, 2022 with his own weapon by an anti-white, non-white who grabbed a rock off the ground, knocked him unconscious, and then murdered him with his own weapon. And that was, and I can't remember the name of the town, but that was the South Shore of Massachusetts that happened. While I have it in mind, to Hans and Julia, just FYI, I did hand over co-host invitations that I'm not really sure how X managed to split it up, but I noticed all space that you're listed as speakers and not co-hosts. So you can perhaps, when you come around, tell me what you're seeing on your end. But when I try to add you or invite you again, it gives me an error. It says you're only allowed up to 2 co-hosts, which is interesting because I'm not showing any. Mr. Biospirit of the West.
Thank you for sharing the laughing baby at the end. That really got me smiling. It reminded me of the time that I went to Great America with my niece and nephews, and they're kind of the same age as I am, because my oldest brother was much older than me, and I was in the roller coaster going up with my niece next to me, and she has one of those infectious laughs like that. And she started laughing as we were going up, up to the top of the roller coaster, and she was just laughing like a maniac, and it started making me laugh. And I don't particularly like roller coasters, but that was one of the funnest times I've ever had, was because she was laughing so hard, and it made me laugh, and I just had a wonderful time. So yes, thank you so much for that. It was a great space, and looking forward to more as we go along. Great stuff here. Thank you.
That's awesome. I'm glad it brought a smile on your face and brought you a fond memory. And as I look at that, apart from the immediate laugh that I got just watching it, it also should bring something else into all of our minds, that what are we really doing, and what are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? Well, we are doing white well-being work because we want to leave at the very least a less anti-white world for our children, for babies like this little child of a few months old, so that hopefully, as they get to grow into an adult, they don't have to deal with the anti-white hell that we live in today. So, eyes on the prize, guys. That right there, that is our prize. Mr. Hans.
Yeah, I just today I looked at a video where my son was riding me. He was on my back, and riding like a horse, and he was laughing like that. It is it is something wonderful. Um, yeah. Um, yes. I mean, this it started with the Zippo lighter today. Isn't it wonderful to have fire in your pocket? Yeah, and occasionally I lose my lighter, but I not more than one day, because I use it every day. Thanks. That was a really another wide-ranging discussion. Thanks, everyone. Good.
Well, the solution to that, of course, is to carry two lighters. And it's funny because I actually do. Uh, the first lighter I was reading the date code off is the one that's in my pocket, and then the other one is actually in my pipe tobacco pouch. So technically, I always have two lighters on me, because two is one and one is none. It just always works that way. Last but not least, my friend Julia.
Well, I am not showing as a co-host on my end, and I never got an invitation, so that definitely something is glitchy with X. But I have figured out how to add things to the jumbotron, so that's a success. um, and yeah, great conversation. I like it when we have so many different people weighing in, and it's fun when it just kind of flows naturally like that, and getting to know everyone. So thank you, and look forward to the next one.
Hopefully, the next one will run a little bit smoother. Although, apart from the co-host issue, this at least ran fairly smooth today, in X terms anyway. We know these spaces do tend to be very strange and buggy. I don't know if it's just because they don't like white well-being, if it's just the fact that their staff is white erased, or if we've got gremlins that run around and pull various cables. Who knows? Um, but hey, it is what it is. Thanks to all of you on the YouTube stream who watched. I appreciate all of you. And I definitely thank everybody that came here and participated. With that, this has been the Thursday edition of the Shade Tree White Wellbeing NWG Space. We meet here daily at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on X. We practice the Go Free lexicon and concepts as developed by my friend Jason Kuna, No White Guilt. You can find him here on X as at No White Guilt NWG. Elsewhere is simply No White Guilt, and on the web at nowhiteguilt.org. I want to thank each and every one of the speakers and all of you who showed up to listen. You all make this space possible by bringing your diverse experience, skill sets, and intelligence here for all of us to share. Without all of your participation, whether as speakers or listeners, it would just be me, a somewhat handsome old man, just rambling in the space. And I don't know if I'm interesting, but y'all show up, so I must be doing something right. Thanks again. I truly appreciate y'all. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. I love you all and hope to see you all tomorrow under the shade tree where we continue to go free. Bye-bye.
Are you noticing changes in our country you find troubling? Do you feel unsafe and at a loss to remedy these fundamental shifts? Have you found the book Go Free by Jason Kuna? The Go Free method provides excellent meme curatives and specific language skills to overcome the anti-white psychological warfare being waged against us across the West. Go Free, a guide to aligning with the archetype of Western kind by Jason Kuna, available on Amazon.
Our children are priceless, and we would do anything to protect them. So why aren't you using Go Free to protect them from the most harmful ideas? Decades in the making, Go Free is a simple yet brilliant practice designed to free us from destructive socio-political ideas. As words are the tools with which we think, Go Free promotes precise, simple, and targeted language to counteract psychological warfare. When you go free of the system's control over your word choice, you liberate your thinking. As you grow, you can empower others. And the most important thing you can do is inoculate our children against the ideas that are meant to harm them.